Welcome to the Open Door Policy. Each week on this podcast, we sit down with a different guest and talk about a letter. Archbishop Vigneron's Unleash the Gospel pastoral letter.
Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
All right.
Be about it.
Each guest we have on this show we think is living it out in a new and exciting way. Before we get started, if you like what you hear and you want to help us be part of this movement to unleash the gospel, be sure to subscribe and share our podcast with your family and friends. And while you're at it, leave us a review on iTunes. On this episode of Open Door Policy, Danielle and I sit down with Christina Hall, a recent convert to the Catholic faith who is working in ministry and loving being a Catholic.
Hey, Father Steve,
Hey,
back in the saddle.
Danielle.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Pretty great. Did you have any, just wondering how your day went, how your week went, how your life's been going?
Yeah, what's God doing?
What's
That's what
God
you're
doing?
asking
That's
me,
what I was
right?
asking you.
Yeah.
Thanks for picking up.
You know, I got together with a old friend of mine, not old, but a friend of mine from seminary. He and his wife and their kids yesterday. And that was just like so much fun to see how like we were at the same point a few years ago, a number of years ago now. Mm. And like the Lord led us in different paths, but he's kept us as friends and get to see how he's working in my friend Joe's life and just to kind of like share a lot of laughs and stories from seminary, but also to see the way God has like made him into a great husband and father. And so that was a great joy for me.
Dude, that is super cool. It's always good making and meeting new friends. Speaking of friends, joined today with Christina Hall.
Hey, Christina, how are you?
Hey, I'm good.
That's good.
Christina, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
As ready as I'm going to be.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to lead us off. Christina, what is your most used emoji?
Probably the crying face because I'm always laughing.
What would be your walk-up music?
Rocky.
The Rocky theme song?
Yes, the Rocky theme song.
What is your favorite piece of religious art?
It's one of the angels that they have at the cathedral right now in meeting room A. It's this huge angel. But right now that's one of my favorite pieces. It really looks like one of the angels on the wallpaper in the Chancery Chapel. It's a huge, like 12-foot angel.
That's pretty cool. So what do you think is overrated?
Pineapples on pizza.
Okay.
Christina, what literary character would you be friends with?
So I can't think of his name, but it is the baby llama in Llama Llama Red Pajama.
Good.
What is your favorite hymn?
This Little Light of Mine. I mean, it's just one of the first ones I learned as a kid. And, you know, honestly, it makes me, I just use that all the time when talking about the Unleash the Gospel videos.
Yeah.
It just makes me think of something glowing on the inside.
What season would you be?
Fall.
And what is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
God is not in the past. God is not in the future. He's right now.
Christina, what is your favorite Bible story?
The birth of Christ.
All right.
Ooh, and what non-traditional pet would you have?
I am not a pet person.
So none.
Nice. You know, that reminds me, so that would 100% be my mom's answer because she does not like animals. So, and actually, Christina is here with her beautiful children. How many kids do you have?
4, which is why I do not need a pet.
That's exactly what my mom would say because she has 5 kids. Anyway, let's jump back into these.
Yeah, so Rocky as your walk-up music, like dun 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 dun. That Rocky or the Eye of the Tiger one?
More the Eye of the Tiger.
Okay.
See, I always call it the Rocky theme songs, but
Well, they're both like
Yeah.
legit Rocky.
They're both great walk-up tunes.
Yeah. Is that your favorite movie too?
totally not my favorite movie.
Okay.
I've probably watched it 30 times and fell asleep on it every single time.
So you don't even know what happens in the end.
Embarrassingly, no.
That's all right. I'm not going to give it away. Question for Father Steve. Have you ever do you know
seen
what
Rocky?
No,
Yeah,
no,
I've
no, no,
seen
no, no,
Rocky.
no, no, no. Do you know what Llama Llama Red Pajama
I
is?
have no idea.
Have you
It's a
ever
kid's book,
seen
I'm guessing, right?
the ludicrous cover of Llama Llama Red Pajama?
No. I have many holes in my pop culture references, and you have pointed one out here.
Okay.
Hey, llama, red pajama.
Pineapples on pizza.
Totally overrated. You are dead on,
Thank
Christina.
you. I am savory over sweet.
Have you seen that like short little video of how to properly eat a pizza with pineapple?
Throw it in the trash.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, you guys
you
are
like
a little
it?
bit harsh. I'm not against it. It's not my favorite, but if someone like gave
No.
me a free pizza,
There is no
I'd eat
neutral.
it.
There is no neutral ground here,
Well,
Danielle.
don't get me wrong. I eat all types of pizza.
Right.
But all pizza is not created equally.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
This little light of mine. We'll talk in a little bit about your journey to the Catholic faith, but I would guess you knew that song before you became Catholic.
Oh, totally. I grew up not even going to church.
Yeah.
And I think that was just a very catchy song. And whenever I got sent to church with other people, specifically like when I got sent to the South for summer vacation or with people, it's like, oh, okay, great. I know this song. So I always felt like welcome when the
That's the
church
one
sang it.
you're
Yeah, that
at
was the
home.
one thing that I knew.
Did you learn the hand gestures for it?
I did not.
Danielle, did you learn the hand gestures?
I feel like I know the hand gestures for it, but
Hashtag Catholic schools. There.
super cool. Well, I feel like we know you a little bit better, so thank you so much.
No problem.
So, Christina, we'd love to hear about how the Lord's working in your life, your testimony. Could you share with us a bit about what God's doing in your life and how he brought you to the Catholic faith?
Well, right now, he's totally keeping me patient and calm with my kids scratching at the door.
Yeah. I think we got to hear him. Yeah, that was great.
Father Steve got a great picture drawn of a unicorn, and that's going to go on social media. Post it up there, colorful unicorn, and they even took a picture. They drew a picture of what we look like.
It was
so
awesome.
if you don't know what we look like, you can also check.
Now
I'll
you know.
throw it up on the social for sure.
I came into the church in 2017
Okay.
through my association with Catholic schools. So my oldest son, who is now entering 7th grade, started going to Catholic schools when he was in 1st grade. And we had moved from a really good school district into a neighborhood, which was a nice neighborhood, but we found out that all of our neighbors were sending their kids to a Catholic school.
Okay.
And it was actually, I believe, the preferred school in the neighborhood. We missed registration just by one day. Wow. So it was a Friday, and I was going to register him for the school of choice. And I said, I'll just wait until Monday.
Yeah.
Monday came, and I realized I had missed the deadline. So at that point, I had to send him to a Catholic school. And it was no problem other than the financing, but it was a new opportunity. I was totally interested. My husband had went to Catholic schools, first through high school, even some college. So the idea was refreshing to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And it was through my involvement with the Catholic school and also, the parish, St. Valentine in Redford, that I, first encountered Mass. And I just totally became involved in the parish life there.
What did you think of Mass when you first encountered it? Was it like, oh, this is great, or what are they doing, or it's kind of familiar?
I specifically remember being like totally excited, like, yes, I'm going to Mass. I remember posting on media, like just dropping Mass, like, Mass on Friday, getting ready to go to Mass with Bryce. And my husband's like, I don't know why you're so excited. You're just going to stand up, sit down, drink some wine. Wait, you haven't even been baptized. You can't even drink the wine. So you're just going to stand up and sit down and be tired. But I was still like totally pumped and ready to go. And then when I got there, I was like, oh, this is different. But the entire time I was there, like I was filled with chills. I was like, okay. And people weren't looking at me like a crazy woman with all of these kids, like crawling everywhere. Because at the time, I was either pregnant and had like 2 1-year-olds, or I was pregnant with 2 like under 1-year-olds, or
because you have twins, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But whatever. I had little kids with me, and it was like totally fine. I wasn't getting any stares, and people were like totally happy to see us. And I remember them saying like, okay, we'll see you next week. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Now, did you come from like a Christian background, or, because you said you knew this little light of mine, but like but that was when you were a child. Like at this point of like adulthood, married life, were you guys like praying? Were you going to church once in a while, or like not really anything?
We weren't going to church at all.
Okay.
Other than in the parking lot to do drop-offs for school. I grew up visiting churches with family members or friends, or only going on special occasions, not even we weren't even like a Creaster family. Like it was just, if someone invited us to go, then possibly. But it was during college and early adulthood where I was like really seeking Jesus and visiting different types of churches. And I spent the most of my time at a Presbyterian church.
Yeah.
And so I considered myself a non-denominational Christian.
So you were considering yourself a Christian at that point. And
Yes.
so you like knew who Jesus was. You were familiar more with the Bible and stuff. So it wasn't like, whoa, everything's insane. It was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And in fact, the first time that I really like totally admitted like Jesus is real, I believe was as a kid at summer camp.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So it had been like a little bit of a journey to this point.
Right. And it was a journey of self-discovery because I had grew up not, Jesus wasn't really talked about in my household. So it was like, wow, I got to go meet this guy. Like, where is he at?
Wow. So then you had this experience with the Mass with your son. And then what?
It's like, wow, it really wasn't that bad. But I wasn't continuing to go. Then I started finding myself just going to more church events and then all school masses. So I used that. That was my shallow entry point. Like I would go with the kids and I knew it was important. And then it was when I became a coach. I was coaching soccer and track where I felt I really had to be like a good, solid example for these kids because I knew that the kids were Catholic and their parents were Catholic. So I thought it was odd for them to, to either not go to Mass on Sundays or to either not be paying attention. And so that's when me being a role model for these kids is when I really kind of stepped my game up.
Dang. And so then you said in 2017 you joined the church?
Right. So it was the fall of 2016 where I said, okay, finally, I had Bryce when he was in second grade, all of his friends were doing their first Holy Communion. So he's like, Mom, can I get baptized? And I'm like, yeah, you can, but not right now. And he's like,
right.
He's like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, we're not Catholic. He's like, well, how come we're not Catholic? And, I just kind of shoot him off. It's like, well, once I learn about it, then
sure,
you can, then we'll know. You can't just dive into something and not know about it. And then he's like, well, I know about it. He's like, oh,
I'm going to a Catholic school, Mom. I know about it.
Right. And so it was through my dialogues with him where it got to the point of me just saying like, okay, well, what do you know? Like just listening as a parent and then, hey, let's see what I'm really spending my money on. Right. Let's see how much you know to actually me truly being interested and wanting to find out myself. And so the fall of 2016 is when I started doing the RCIA classes. And even at that time, I was like, well, I'm just here to check it out. Like, it feels like home. I want to be a part of it, but I don't know if I can sign up for it. This is a huge commitment.
Yeah.
Which is what RCIA is, though. Like the first part, right? Isn't it kind of like, hey, this is what's up?
Period of inquiry.
And then after that is like, okay, what do you think? Is it a yes or is it a no?
And I was totally committed because at that time I was working and my husband was also working and he would get off work early. And well, he worked at that time like non-traditional hours. So he would leave work early and so that we could go to RCIA together. And then we would drag the kids with us.
Wow.
And so, at this time, if we're thinking 2 years ago, I had a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old and 2 4-year-olds.
Wow.
So no one noticed you in the class, right? You just kind of...
The quiet corner.
Right. So we always had our own table.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool, though, that you got to do that as a family.
It was. It really was.
So you were baptized. Was your husband baptized?
He was.
And Bryce was?
Yeah, so and all 6 of us are baptized.
All
together.
of it. That is so
On the
cool.
same day. Oh, I have another family. And your confirmation saint, who did you pick?
Did you go with your original name? Your birth name?
I did go with my original name.
Okay. Yeah.
Christine, the astonishing St. Christina the Astonishing.
I don't know anything about St. Christine or Christina.
St. Christine the Astonishing, well, one of her main stories is that one time she passed away, or so they thought. And at
I think
her
that
funeral,
happens to all the
she
saints.
elevated.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah, she elevated, and that's why she was given the name Christina the Astonishing. I my sister's name is Christine, and so that's how I learned about that saint, is kind of through my sister.
Do people call you Christina the Astonishing?
They
No.
could.
Not
No.
yet.
They
Not
could.
yet. Maybe
Not
I'm gonna
yet.
make my kids call me that now. So if you don't want to call me mom,
Here's the other option.
exactly.
Is the Lord doing anything, or has He done anything that since you've come into the Catholic faith? I mean, what has that been like to live as a Catholic now?
Wow. We are totally head over heels immersed into our faith right now.
Yeah.
My husband and I, we both, after about 6 months of after we were baptized, work was just different for both of us. Mm-hmm. We found ourselves moaning and groaning and complaining more. It's what are we doing? And so I got an email from our parish at the time saying that we had a sister parish that was looking for some, I want to say it was part-time work. And I remember sending a message back saying, my husband's interested. Who can he call? However, I hadn't even told my husband about this email. And so it was for a position at Divine Child. And I remember calling and asking for the pastor, and they're like, he's not available, but how can I help you? And I got the director of operations. I was like, hi, my name's Christina Hall. I know this may sound odd, but my husband, Anthony, is very interested in this position we got an email for. And this is going to sound even more strange. However, he has a dentist appointment. He has a dentist appointment tomorrow. He never takes time off work, and he would love to come in and meet you if that's okay. And I guess I was just either weird her out or won her over the phone, where she's like, okay.
One could call it apostolic boldness.
Yeah, either way, it had the same effect, right?
Yeah.
It got the job done.
Exactly. And, long story short, he left his job that he had been at for over 14 years.
Wow.
To go work at Divine Child. And now, we've become so much a part of that community that we're at that parish, and now all 4 of our kids are going to school there.
Praise God.
Yeah. And think this was the same family, only stuck our toe into a Catholic church because our kid was going to school there because I missed a registration deadline at our local school. So...
And God took that little kind of misstep or that little first step and has brought you to where you are today.
Totally. And about 6 months of him working for the church, it's wow, this guy is different. He's pulling out a Bible. He's telling me all these stories of him chatting it up with the priest over there. What's going on? I was I need to find a job for myself within the church. And, I did. And just another amazing way how God works is that, it was one position at a Catholic school that I had applied for. And when I applied for it, I think during the time I applied, they were actually filling the positions. It was probably over winter break or something. And so I seen the particular position that I work in now for the Archdiocese. And it said, one of the qualifications was good standing Catholic, familiar with the inner city, blah, blah, blah. And I was I'm familiar with the city. I was born and raised in Detroit, and, I'm all about community service. I'm always in the city. But I don't know what a good standing Catholic is. I've only been, doing this for a little bit of time.
You're I know I'm Catholic. I don't know if I'm in good standing yet.
How good am I at being this?
But I just remember applying at midnight, and then literally hours later I was getting a phone call to see if I could come in for an interview. And I just, once I got here, it was just the best. It's the best job I've ever had. And I remember my first day of work I got so many hugs, and so many people were just we heard all about you and we can't wait to meet you. And I'm how do you even know who I am? What is this going on?
Yeah.
So it's really been a great experience to be able to just learn so much and grow in my faith. And I always joke and say that my position working in the chancery is like my RCIA externship.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly like on a mission to like learn every day.
Yeah.
I get my work done too, but like
Yeah, that's so
But
true.
you're
though.
growing. You get to grow in the middle of it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I've learned so much from working at my job too. But you know what my friend Father Grayson, who was a guest once, would say is it's amazing how God is always calling us to know him more deeply and more deeply and more deeply. So even in your story, like you're like, oh, I missed a deadline. I guess I'll send my kid to Catholic school. He's like, Mom, why am I not baptized? Well, I'm not really sure. And here you are. So thanks be to God, he's just never finished.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
Yeah,
Christina.
no problem.
Let's jump a little bit into this letter. Unleash the gospel here. Marker 8.2.
8.2.
Wow. Now with echo. 8.2, the one sheep. Just reading over this, some really interesting things. One thing that it says is, yet in his own ministry, Jesus clearly made it a priority to reach the lost, those who were not in right relationship with God. That one really stuck out to me. Like, it's tricky to reach the people who aren't in right relationship with God. And also, maybe people who aren't seeking on their own, if that makes sense. Your story is a little different, but I guess like as people who work in church and work in ministry, kind of what are your thoughts on that? How do we do a good job of stepping outside of our buildings and our little spheres and really reaching out to people who maybe aren't stepping inside?
With me personally, one of the biggest ways that I'm able to help on the outside is just really being bold about sharing like my joy and my own personal happiness that Jesus is bringing and the works that he's doing in my life. So just constantly remaining positive about all situations or, sharing my story. And, it's easy for me to witness and help and step out to people because I work for the church. Now, if I did not work for the church, that's a bit different. And also having my kids in Catholic schools is another tool for me. So I use tricks.
Well, I mean, there are people in our Catholic schools who I think would qualify as that, right?
Right.
Oh, definitely.
That don't have that relationship with the Lord or not in right relationship with him. So I think our schools are meant to be, as you experienced, a tool of evangelization. So like I think Catholic schools, especially, we have a number that have kind of a high number of non-Catholic students enrollment, that are just kind of fertile ground for showing the beauty of the faith, which kind of moved you in this mysterious way, you and your family.
I was just reading this new study, ? It was on Detroit Catholic. Did you read this as well? Lady was, I think Tamara Hall Fromm was her name.
Yeah.
And she wrote a thesis, ? Dang it. Now as I'm saying this, I'm like, it sounds like I didn't even read this article. So my apologies to the writer original researcher of this. But she was writing about I'm using finger quotes right here, nuns, NONES.
Nuns, a term sometimes used to describe people with no religious affiliation.
And she did research with 20 to 30 young adults and adults who had joined the church after not being baptized. And she was like, what attracted you to this faith if you didn't grow up in it, And it was interesting because they said it was like accompaniment, and people who they saw who were living authentic Christian lives who attracted them to it. And instead of hearing a song or going to church or something like that. And I thought that was really an interesting study and kind of interesting because the person who accompanied you was your child who was like, hey, I really want to be a part of this life of faith. Can we do that?
Also now looking back, like some of my role models or current mentors have been people that are Catholic and you don't realize it, right? So
Sure.
Some of the most loving and tender and gentle people, looking back, they're Catholic. some of the organizations, like I was a former client at the Linen Pregnancy Center, and it's a Catholic organization. And beforehand, I didn't even realize it was a Catholic organization.
Sure.
I just thought it was these group of people who were just totally like have this great charitable nonprofit going on. And, oh, by the way, we're going to be praying for you. Oh, by the way, Jesus loves you. Oh, by the way, pray to St. Joseph. Mm-hmm. It's still, at the time, not being Catholic, they weren't, using air quotes, they weren't Catholic to me. They were just these awesome women who totally believed in me and my future, and everything they told me happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think what I hear you saying is they weren't overbearing with how they were relating to you. They cared about you. They wanted to kind of show you the love of Christ without like beating you over the head with it.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's beautiful. That's what God calls us to be in our families, in our neighborhoods, in whatever situation we wind up being in. And talking about this piece of the pastoral letter, the one sheep, I was on retreat just not too long ago, and that, like, this part just kept coming back to me about God's particular love for me, right? So this comes from Luke chapter 15, that the good shepherd leaves the 99 and goes after the one. And I think this is one of the most like beautiful and counterintuitive parts of Christianity, that the Lord loves you and loves me individually, personally. We're not just kind of part of the collective, but we're individually sought after by the Lord. And I think about how God did that for my life, the kind of removing obstacles and kind of breaking into my life in a way that I could understand him. And I think about like all the things that had to go right in your life, Christina and Danielle. I assume you can think of that. Like I don't know those particulars of your story, but
I also think about too all the things that went wrong when I was part of the 99, right? When I wasn't singled out.
Yeah.
For when I was lost in the pack. And, being lost in the pack, you can't be singled out to, for someone to totally love on you and share those graces of God with you.
Yeah, you're not put in a position. I guess partly what I'm trying to think of here or trying to articulate is like you're not put in a position where you can appreciate the depth of God's love for you, because like you don't quote unquote need it as much, right? But when you get to a place where you realize how much you're in need of it, sometimes that's being the one, being kind of singled out or lost, that God comes seeking for you and comes seeking for me. And that's what I find, like, those are the disciples we need, right? That's who I need to be. Someone who's willing to go out, find someone who is not part of the fold right now, and love them with the heart of Christ, to show them the good news of the gospel, like you were loved, like you were shown.
It's interesting. You're giving me a word, right? This is not thanks, friend. That this is not a numbers game, right? God doesn't really care about numbers. He's just kind of like recklessly wasteful for us. And you're like, dang it, that's not even resourceful. Yeah. When I was in high school literature class, but my teacher was and is a pastor. No, maybe he's retired now. But I remember,
but
we were
a non-Catholic.
Pastor, yeah. I remember we were talking about, like, I want to say, like, in some great literature book, some pastor was removed from a country church and placed in the big city. And I was like, well, that makes sense, because then he can reach more souls. And my literature teacher saying, does God care about numbers, Danielle? And then, like, high school Danielle, like, wrestling with it and being like, but the fruit is important. But then also being like, but the 99 and the 1. So, yeah, it's interesting to me. And also, there's this concept of, like, leaving the fold, like, walking outside of the gate and being like, what up, little sheep? Dude, I was in Ireland last year, found a lost sheep on the side of a mountain. I was like,
put it on your shoulders?
No, I didn't know what to do. I was like, go home. But I guess that, like, leads me to a question. And I think you answered this a little bit. I don't really know a whole lot about the Lennon Center. I'm happy to hear more about it. But where are we as a church seeking and like walking into places that are a little sketchy, like not sketchy, but like not like clean and safe,
Not safe,
you know?
yeah.
And in my life, I used to be a part of like this theater group when I was in high school. And a few years ago, they asked me to come back and like volunteer as an adult for a weekend. I'm like, ain't no problem. And I showed up and I was just like, dang, like the depths of stuff these high schoolers are dealing with was like so deep. And I was like, this is so much like more raw than what I deal with, like in my like, and I work in like a city parish in Detroit, right? So it's like in the city parish, like even that is like more safe and clean than like what I'm being faced with and like encountering in these young people's lives. So it just convicted me a little bit. Like I got to be braver.
There are tons of programs and different things going on. I mean, I could think of like the Backpack Ministries or Father Marco. He goes out and he helps
Better
homeless.
Man or
Better Way Detroit.
Yeah.
You know, so those are two things that come to mind. Mm-hmm. But we should be at a point where we're listing so many that we just totally run out of time.
Right.
And I think in terms of like how do we do that is we really have to see like the God in everyone.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as some people may seem unapproachable and they're not, but it's very small things. I actually, the other day, I feel like I don't give enough to maybe like homeless people or poor people that I see on the streets, right?
Okay.
You know, because I pass them every day. And on one hand, I may feel as if like, oh, well, you know, if I constantly do this, you know, then what do I have? Because as a mom of 4 kids, I'm always strapped for cash or I don't have cash on me. But then I the other day I bought lunch for myself and I saw someone and I thought about it. I was like, you know, I'll just give him my lunch. But even if it wasn't that, I think just starting to make a habit of even like smiling and talking to people. And I mean, this is something that I personally do. But if everyone just literally like just looked at people eye to eye and didn't think about bad situations, right? Or you're afraid to go into certain situations because they may seem sketchy, but literally having the faith that like God is going to protect you in whatever situation that you walk into, I think that is what makes them more approachable.
Yeah, so I think you're pointing to something really important of like programs are huge and really important, but it's not just about programs, right?
Mm-hmm. It's about formation.
It's about my life. Like how am I having my eyes open to the one sheep that God is putting in front of me, whether it's the person I'm sitting next to on a plane, the homeless person I meet, whether it's someone in my family, maybe that like I struggle to be kind to, or like has a different worldview as I bang the mic around here, has a different worldview than I do, family or friends. You know, that when I think of one sheep, I think of, as we're talking about, like, I think, Danielle, you were saying this, like those who have a very different worldview than I do. And how am I willing to like enter into that space on social media or in person with love, with the truth of the gospel, but with the confidence that like, okay, I don't have to sort all of this out on the first conversation, the first interaction, and just kind of being with people. Danielle, I think you do this really well. Like you have this eclectic community of people like in your life who are at very different places. And I mean, I think you do this really well.
You know what? I thought, well, thank you, first of all. And it's always a work in progress. But I heard a quote that I think about a lot in a homily like 100 years ago. And it said, ministry is about relationships, not about tasks. And it's something that I have to like remind myself, like on a little sticky note on my bulletin board that has traveled with me like the past 3 jobs. And it's really interesting. It's just like, it's a reminder to myself, like the people who I encounter and are people who are important, right? And God has placed in my path for a really specific purpose. So if someone comes to the door of my office and is like, "Hi, do you want to look at pictures of my grandkid?" Like, I mean, like like, I mean, like, I'm not saying I'm not working.
I know the right answer to that, but I have a feeling you're telling me it's a different answer.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying tasks aren't important, but there is like that element of accompaniment of like, I'm excited for you. Like, tell me a little bit about it. And when someone's like, dude, this is like a tip that I learned when I was working at Costco back in college. One time, like these older ladies who were like friends of my mom stopped in Costco. They're like, "Hey, Danielle, how are you doing?" I was like, "I'm doing okay. Just like, working in college. So like, pray for me." And they're like, "Okay." And I meant it like eventually
later.
And they just did
took
it right
it as
there
like,
on the spot.
like here and now, call upon the gifts of the Holy Spirit charismatically in this freezer aisle. And so they just
the gifts of samples and the gifts of stocking.
And they just like went for it.
Yeah.
And I was like kind of embarrassed, but I'm also like, no one here knows that they know me. So like whatever, it's on them.
Right.
But it like kind of changed the way that I like approached ministry a little bit, is like, hey, we can like show up and be like, yeah, like let's bring this right now too.
People always think, how can we go out and how can we, like face this big bad world that's out there? It's really not always the homeless person. It's really not always the, the gang-ridden neighborhood.
Right.
It could be your next door neighbor, right? That you never see going to church when you go to church.
Yeah,
your family members.
It could be your child who's struggling. Well, I think of what Mother Teresa would say to people as she would go around, and they'd say, hey, I want to do what you do. I want to do this great thing of taking care of the poorest of the poor. And she'd say, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. Like, be great at being a mom. Be great at being a dad. Be great at being a neighbor. Be great at being a brother or sister. Like, love the people God has put in your life and be open to new people he's going to put in your life to really pour in. This is your phrase, Danielle, to pour into them the gifts that God has given you. And that's so crucial, especially as we think about like wasting time with one person, right? And that's what the one sheep is about. It's wasting time with one person, because God wastes all sorts of time with us.
You know what? As we kind of like draw to a close, we usually like to ask if you have like a word or inspiration or prayer or advice for our listeners. Is there anything that you would like to tell those listening today?
So since we're talking about like, witnessing and reaching those people who maybe are not in the church or things of that nature, one of the things that I actually told a group of people today that I learned is like, don't be embarrassed to pray for somebody, especially, on any circumstance, but especially the people who are unchurched, right? Because you can say anything and it's going to be beautiful to them and they will totally receive it. And if you're praying with someone or for someone who's an expert person in praying, they're just going to be happy that you're right there in the presence praying. So my biggest thing is to not be afraid, to just go for it.
I love it. Thank you so much.
The Open Door Policy Studio was overflowing with Christina and her 4 beautiful children as she talked about living and calling the one sheep in her life and how each of us can do that as well.
And once again, before we say goodbye, if you liked this episode, please share it with your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, your Trader Joe cashier. You can also leave us a review on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle is @OpenDoorDetroit. Help us unleash the gospel. Open Door Policy was produced by Ron Pangborn and the creative team of the Archdiocese of Detroit.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I'm Father Steve Poulos with Danielle Center.
And this has been another episode of Open Door Policy.
Mommy, is this really a real microphone?
Yeah.